So welcome back to Control Alt Dev. Today we're diving deep, not into AI hype, but into deep thinking. We're talking about blue ocean strategy, where the real opportunities lie beyond the noise, and how job overlap with AI is changing the landscape faster than any of us imagined. Microsoft's latest research says 40 roles are already being reshaped by AI, from developers and writers to analysts and marketers. But instead of focusing on what's being replaced, Paul and I are exploring where the new space opens up, the innovation, the creativity, problem solving that machines still can't touch.
So this week, we're looking at a very interesting article that Sean has shared with me around the future of work and the future of jobs and it direct relation to AI. So yeah, Sean, if you could just give the listener an overview of the article and some of the key points you've took from it, and then we'll go into the conversation.
Yeah, so the article was on Sky News Money, and it was a blog about the 40 jobs most at risk of AI, Paul, and the 40 it can't touch. So stripping it back down to what they're actually talking about here is they're talking about what are the overlaps that AI is obviously coming into our world now in terms of, what are the jobs? Is it we've all heard that copywriters, web developers, all these kind of jobs are being thrown at us, saying that AI is now disturbing them, and that's what the article's about, really. So it's talking about certain individuals that have lost lots of money because AI is now doing their jobs for them. So it's like the administrative jobs, Paul, is what it's going on about. So that's why I sent it to you on Saturday morning, because I thought it's great that these kind of articles are out there, but let's explore it a bit further. Let's put it into some context. Let's talk about what we've seen from our sort of world of what we're looking at right now, and especially when we're both in software and our kind of the ethos of what we do, AI is actually touching on that right now, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's unavoidable for us. I think it's ingrained into our day-to-day processes and how we improve our actual delivery. But it's also ingrained in like future thinking and where we sit. And I think we feel, as a company, we feel the direct impact of AI in both the positive and the negative that we've talked about in previous episodes. I think one of the biggest things that stuck out for me when you shared the article, which was brilliant, to be honest, and we'll put it into the show notes so that obviously people can review it for themselves, is it goes back to this kind of almost, it reminded me of episode 1. So do you remember in episode 1 of this podcast, we talked about the CEO of Fiverr, and him basically reminding us that the stuff that is easy to do today is gone. The AI is the doer now. So actually everybody needs to level up. And I think when I looked at those jobs, what I see is that they're not going to disappear. I think that's the media hype. I think the thing that there won't be copywriters or there won't be interpreters anymore is not the case. But there will be very few, if that makes sense. Only the real experienced, talented kind of copywriters will exist, because if you're doing if your job is solely the doing, you are completely under threat. There's no doubt about it, because you can have something 24/7, it doesn't need feeding, doesn't need holidays, that will respond to your every command. What it doesn't have is context. It has no idea about how to write good copy. It'll say it does, but the difference is if you put a talented copywriter in front of AI and you put a junior copywriter, you'll get very, very different results. And the point is, it's about who's using the tool, and that you're the driver of the tool. You're not just responding to what it's doing. If you just ask it 100 times to give you a task, to do a task for you, it'll do it happy as Larry. Whether that task is of any good quality is a totally different thing. So the people who will use it properly are the ones who value the input as well. They value the driver of it. So there will always be interpreters, but they won't be at the same volume, if that makes sense, because there will be niches and expertise in every area of life. But there will be interpreters 100%. There will be alternatives that are cheaper, faster, but they're not necessarily as accurate.
And from what Paul was saying there, the interpreters, I think that was what the number one.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, for context.
Yeah. So it doesn't lack it lacks the personal touch.
Yeah.
And and obviously, yes, you're right. If you asked AI to write 100 different, well, not different, if you asked AI to write something, you probably would 100 times, you get a different output, wouldn't you?
Yeah, every time.
Yeah,
It's non-deterministic. It's got no context. It's, one of the ways everyone talks about prompting, and people kind of skip prompting nowadays. But one of the reasons that you prompt it properly is to give it context. But if a junior person won't have the same level of context that they can contribute to it, so you'll get different results.
yeah,
I saw a great analogy that was in relation to somebody else commenting on this exact same article, and they said something which I thought was really good: is AI is the hammer, but you still need to be a carpenter. You still need to know what you want to build, in what order the things go in, and what you need to do to create a quality piece of, say, furniture. But AI will be your hammer. You'll get very, very different results. And I thought that was a really good thing. And going back to a house building analogy in the past, yeah, we all have the ability now to be an architect. But you put me in front of it and try to build a house, AI will say, yeah, I can help you build a house. Here you go. Here's what you need. Here's X, Y, and Z. You put an architect in front of it, it's a very, very, very different outcome. And that's where people need to level up. And it goes, that to hammer a point home, what we need to be doing as experts is working on the stuff that was near impossible before. We really need to level up our game and work on the most complex stuff, because the age of doing is gone.
yeah.
And the other trend in AI that wasn't discussed in the article, but that keeps coming up in the forums and the conversations I'm having is, it's an old adage we've said again in the previous podcast. We're using today the worst version of AI. It will only get better tomorrow and the day after. And something that I think people struggle to understand with any real, it's a common debate in my household, and I really hope my kids and my wife don't listen to this episode because it's directed at them. But there will come an age, which I think is within 12 months, where you won't know it's AI generated, whether that's audio, whether that's video, whether that's a blog article. Everyone's like, oh, I know it's AI because people put emojis and M dashes in there and they never used to. But I think the speed of change is relentless, and the accuracy of it. And the more that we use it on a daily basis, the millions of people who use it, the more you're training it to be even a better version of itself in the most basic way. I think it's going to be near impossible to actually work out what's AI. At the moment, it's obvious. You go onto YouTube and you see one video, you see the next video, and you can tell it's almost comedy, isn't it? That it's AI generated and it doesn't quite, something doesn't feel right. I think those feelings are going to disappear, and we're going to be flooded with it if we're not already, and it will be very hard to distinguish what is AI.
When I was reading this article, I was thinking back to when I was a developer. When I was in my 30s, I remember my boss at the time. He sort of jumped ship and then went and got developers in India. So
Okay.
my job was impacted straight away because of the cheap labour available in India. Now, isn't that kind of that's not too dissimilar to what's happening here, in the fact that I didn't lose my job. I became a project manager, so I started to write the PRDs, the discovery phases, and then obviously then I engaged with developers. So it didn't really feel like I was losing my job, although I did have the creative side of writing software. Overnight, just suddenly I'd lost that because those developers in India were cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you're saying here, it's the administrative stuff that the kind of the boring, the automated stuff that we can do now with AI. As you say now, that the sort of stuff that's hard now is that simple stuff, but we've now got to look at more complex stuff. But that's our world, isn't it? In software, really, it's at the end of the
100%.
day, it's always been about how can we create code faster, quicker. What classes are being, what objects. I'm going a bit techie now, but all the classes that are available to kind of reproduce stuff far quicker, and that's where AI is kind of coming into our world, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think people underestimate the. When I looked at that jobs list, I think they're underestimating just what a seismic change we're going through. Because I started my career in tech just before the dot-com bubble, and I know you were around the same time as well. and people go, "Oh, it's a bubble, it's going to burst," or they say, "It's no more revolutionary than the internet." And I actually think it is. I think it's like the internet on steroids. It's like the internet took a long time to actually be adopted. It was 10 years into my career when people were still questioning, do I need a website? Which seems ridiculous. And then for the next 10 years, it's, do I need an app? We're talking about a rate of change across just our industry that's unprecedented. I've never known it go through such seismic shifts over like 3 years since November 2022 when Really Chat was released. And I think the offshoring thing is a really interesting one as well, because that was a seismic change for UK development shops like ours. And it was, we lost a huge percentage of the market to cheaper, faster labor, because it was like, you could go and get a dev shop with 50 developers versus 5 in the UK. And we all know the number of bods on a job does not equal speed. It often adds complexity and it adds confusion.
Yeah. Well, I was interested as well in this article. It was saying, I think, where was it? It was saying DJs were also in this realm of being overlapped by AI. So what did you kind of understand from that?
Well, I mean, again, it's like if you take the leap of faith that you won't know what is AI generated and what isn't.
Yeah.
What is music at the end of the day? It's a soundtrack that you listen to, and it creates an emotion. The reason people like music fundamentally is it has an emotional response. When you're listening to a track on Spotify, you don't know. You really don't know who created it, what they, So there's a band. I will have to look this up, and apologies to the listener because I should be more. But there's an AI band on Spotify that was released. I think it's probably a year ago, 6 months ago. It's like a prog rock band, and there's an image of a band, 4 band members with long hair who look like they're a bit like the Doors, and it's completely made up. It's fictitious. So there's a skill to it in the fact that it is lyrics and music and a voice. But if you listen to it, the profound thing that people were freaking out about is they didn't know it was AI. They couldn't tell, and they were following it, and they were like, "Are they touring?" And it's kind of, that's just okay. That's a high profile case of one band. But yeah, if you look at the fact that you know, electronic music came out and people were like, "Well, it's not a real drummer, it's a drum kit." Well, we all listen to music that doesn't have a real drummer. We all listen to music that doesn't have real keys or real, um, you know, guitars. Most of the music now, it's rare that it's a live band, isn't it? It's an actual band. You're going back to like the 70s to the 90s and earlier. So it's just
Yeah.
another shift. It's
The
just
80s, the 80s is mostly, like you say, electric
yeah,
keyboards, isn't it?
yeah. The beauty of AI, I mean, you have to look at the pros and cons. This is why I say it's always the biggest opportunity and the biggest threat. Is there's people out there who absolutely love music, but have never picked up an instrument, and they kind of, for whatever limiting belief, they're like, no, I don't play. I'm not a musician. AI gives them the ability to have a voice. You look at it in that way. Suddenly, people can create music and they can create songs and they can take ideas out of their head. And traditionally, that's been like the vocalist, hasn't it? The vocalist has kind of been the person with the lyrics and the purpose. In all the bands I've ever played in over the years, it's always been the vocalist who's been like, I've got this idea for a track, or maybe a guitarist. You suddenly have a tool that empowers people and they can have a thought, and it goes. But a lot of these themes, when you look at this job list, it's not scaremongering. It's kind of, I see it as people need to understand what's happening right now and what's happening in the future. And when we're talking the future, we're talking a very small time scale. 3 years, the next 3 years in AI, nobody can predict, not even Sam Altman. There's talk about super intelligence, all this around the corner. But on a day-to-day basis, you have to go back to fundamentally business is about a job to be done, isn't it? And results. You want a job doing. Traditionally, 9 times out of 10, your answer was a human being, and that's changed. That's the fundamental shift. It's the job to be done has not changed. I want an invoice to be created and sent. Okay, so I have an accounts department. I know that's very stupid, like analogy, but that's not the case anymore, and it's not been the case. And the software's come along like Zero and okay, transformed how people do bookkeeping and accounts and P&Ls. That changes things. But when the input and the manual tasks that you do in Zero can be automated, then why do you need bookkeepers? And why do when it's just reconciling bank accounts? it's not within the realms of impossibility that can be auto reconciled. And I think the leap of faith is trust. A lot of people, like I know me and you, in another podcast, we'll talk about how we're using it for marketing. I'm not at the point now where I will auto publish. I just don't. I'm always editing it. It's always got to be my tone of voice. It's always got to be my opinion. I'm not going to just push auto publish because I don't want to spam people with like just. It's easy. You could send a post a minute. Do you know what I mean? It's there. The text there to just spam the world with rubbish, and that's what some companies are choosing to do.
I was talking to a lady just on the way in, actually, in the car, because she's got this situation where she's got a WordPress website. It's not doing particularly well. Um, she really needs to pay for maintenance because it's got fraught with issues and needs to update the plugins and things like that. But basically, bottom line is, I said switch to Shopify because it's a simpler application for you. It buys and sells. You can add to cart, simple. And I said, like you just mentioned there, I said, you could get all your social media arrive every morning with what you need to put out there via AI. You could sort of, I wouldn't suggest, like you say, automating it straight away. Put your voice on it. But in a sense, she was saying that the pain she's been going through just trying to think about what she puts on Facebook and Instagram, well, all that is easy now,
Yeah.
isn't it? So, but I was also I was having a chat with my financial advisor because, I would never walk away from a financial advisor. Let me make this clear if he's listening to this podcast, but they really need to assess where they add value now because they're in that list. AI can automate the daily financial updates, can analyze your portfolio, and even suggest where to buy and how to invest in your pension. So, but obviously, what I prefer the human input there. The fact that he'll do monthly meetings with me, show me where my money's going to be. Of course, AI can do that, but I still a bit old school, I suppose. I like to have a coffee, sit down, and have a conversation. And I think that's still got value. But you're right, financial advisors now, they've got to take that step up now. You can't just sign someone up, don't speak to them for months and months and months on end and take a percentage of the fee each year. You can't do that.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a really key point of all this is, if you go to the bleak, the bleak scenario, the one thing that we all crave is human connection. That's the fundamental of life, isn't it? So the thought of having a fully automated world where everything's taken care for you is like a very lonely and sad world. Do you know what I mean? So like you've said in that illustration, there's elements, and I think this is where it rounds it off, is there's elements where 100% you still want a human interaction, you still want human connection, and you want to trust the person. So like bonding and rapport is everything, and building relationships. It's a very different world if that disappears, and that's where I think going back to this concept of leveling up, one of the jobs to be done is literally to humanize this experience. Like, so if you're going to automate and you've got to personalize it as well, because we've never been in a period of hyper personalization so much before. And I think everybody needs to think not just how do I be the best strategist? If the doing is taken care of, how do I become the best strategist? But then almost, and the other thing is, how do I become the most human brand and the most trusted brand? So yes, have AI handle all of your fundamental operations, your foundations, your kind of the things to be done that you would have previously paid a human to do, and upskill those humans and those workers to really bring a human aspect to your business so that it's not just an automation shop. We had a team meeting yesterday. We have a monthly strategy meeting where we go through kind of like a bit of a retro, really, like what's working, what's not. And, very open conversations about tech stacks, very open conversations about what is the role of the developer. And, the thing that I got back that I loved was just how accepting my team are and open to change. It's not always been the case. In the past, it's been, I'm a developer and I want to code 8 hours a day. And that's changed. That's pretty much gone, because you're not doing the kind of job satisfaction that you used to get when it was you just problem solving it. Everyone's using Claude Code as a pair, like literally a coder who's driving the conversation. So I've drilled into them that, our future is as strategists. And I don't want to go out as a sole consultant and just sell my time for money. I want to build my team so that we're going into multiple businesses. And at the right time, the project manager will come in with their strategic head, the developers will come in with their strategic lens. And it'll be a lot more about almost what we're seeing at the moment is it's auditing, it's kind of analysis, it's kind of reviews of how other companies are adopting AI or how they're building their dev teams. And we're coming in as the strategists, which is a very different thing for my developers. My developers ultimately took a job with me to be able to, code cool stuff and work on decent projects with decent people. And that is fundamentally changing, and they're open to it. And the other thing with the tech stack is with something like Claude Code in your arsenal, they're they're masters at one tech framework, but they're able to code across so many different tech frameworks now because of that level of support. They know what it takes to build an app, to launch it and scale it in production. That's their expertise if you take it. And so they're even realizing that, and they're saying to me, the role of a developer now is to be tech agnostic.
Yeah.
And that's the level of thinking that you have to break through and this is, I think, in all those jobs, when I looked at it, I could see why every single job was listed if you continue to do what you've always done, because the world has moved on. But I 100% believe top of the list was, I think, interpreters and translators.
Yeah.
There will be interpreters and translators because they will be the strategists who are, they're not necessarily doing the interpretation service or the translation service, but they'll be at a level of they're driving the change in the industry. That's the people who will continue to exist. And we work with a deaf interpretation service. So BSL Sign Language is their communication, their translation service. And as pained as it is to say, I can see AI doing BSL. I can see you having a conversation with it, an audio transcription coming in. I can see it doing it, and I can see a day when you can't tell who it is. They genuinely can't tell it's AI. So then that business then has to look at its AI evolution and where it's going. But there will always be the kind of 1% where it is a fully human thing and it has this kind of like wow factor to it, and it's a differentiation service. So another thing I've just gone into my head, sorry, Sean, is there's the concept of the red ocean and the blue ocean strategy. And red ocean, if you look into it, is where it's just on price. It's just overcrowded market. It's fully competitive, and price is the main driver. The blue ocean strategy is where you can't be compared to anybody else. You sit in your own category of one, and people come to you because of what you do and how you do it. And that's where people need to go. They need to put into their businesses some serious level of thought, a deep thinking, to say, yes, my industry is X. It has a future. How do we really become a blue ocean? How do we stand out so people come to us and buy from us? And it's your human experience, but it's also the efficiency and productivity of your operations. And that's where your AI partner sits in, if that makes sense, in terms of the tools you use.
No, it's interesting because obviously, as you know, our developers, majority of them are overseas. So I would say you're light years ahead of where we are, because my developers are pushing back a lot. I did something in Replit the other day, developed it, produced it, and gave it to one of my developers and said, "What do you think of that?" Because he's fundamentally, he was going to go and build it anyway, and his response was, "It's bloaty, this, that, and the other." And I said, "But yes, but look at what I've given you. I've given you something that, in a sense, is you can touch it, you can feel it, or you can't literally, but you know what I'm saying. You can see it on the screen. You get a visual representation of what I interpreted from the customer is what they require. I can see it, and I know that's what they want." And he said, "Yeah. I agree, but he wasn't too impressed with the code. But they've got to embrace this." And I keep saying to them, from listening from what you're doing at Green Gorilla Apps, I keep saying to them, we need to move forward with the times. It's not a case of we're replacing you guys. As you quite rightly said there, Paul, your developers becoming strategists. They're it's just a different level way of thinking now, and you've got to embrace it. You've got to be riding that wave of AI, because if you sit back, then you are going to lose out, aren't you?
Yeah, I think there are sadly some businesses out there who are choosing to be ostriches. They're
Yeah.
choosing to put their head in the sand, and I just don't see I don't see a future how you can't at least have an understanding of what it's going to do. And I think the good news for you, Sean, is it's not always been the case at GJ. Like, so even, going back a few years, just simple conversations around, say, alternative tech stacks would end up in a closed mindset, both from myself and from my team. But I think that there's a breakthrough moment. I can't even pinpoint when it happened, but the conversations we're having now are very much like, this is reality. This is what's happening. This is the trend. Where does the opportunity exist? So one of our core, I built a strategy on basically one of our bread and butter services that we used to offer was we would go into a business and they would need some level of a web portal to drive their operations. I sat in a conference the other day, 1,200 people in a room. And off the back of it, on Slack and on Facebook, I would say at least 50% left that conference and went and built what we used to sell on Replit. And they're all posting their success stories. And this is where you have to sit back and go, okay, it's a massive threat, but what's the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is for the business owner, it's a job to be done. So yeah, the code might be bloated and it might have these limitations that we're all aware of as techies, but they get the result in super quick time. They are getting something that works and does 80% of what they need it to do to fulfill a simple operation that saves someone some time, and they haven't had to engage with an external developer at all to get it. That's incredible. But then what you see the opportunity is you're going to have businesses that are running hundreds of these little mini Replit apps and it's going to add complexity and it's going to have scaling problems and there's going to be security issues because we know what goes into production. So then it's a case of, well, actually, you're going to have more people than ever building bespoke and hitting ceilings. So actually, it's creating a market like Peter Lowe talked about the other day of vibe coding that will then breed. There will be a percentage of those people who come out of here and go, right, now I need a big bespoke software build. And what's beautiful about that when you really think it through is it kind of is anti-SaaS
Yeah.
because you can build exactly what you want instead of compromising and paying for a SaaS license that you use 20% of the features, but you pay the full subscription. So it's going to get people to build stuff that's so customized to their business. But then, okay, how does it move going forward? Now, so I think there's still a place, but it's like, again, it's that level of thinking of going, it's not what it was yesterday. And we've seen a massive drop off in inquiries for that type of service. It's almost disappeared because AI with its speed, it totally ruins the price point that we charge. Like you kind of as a business owner, you struggle to justify it. Do you know what I mean? It's if you know you can go and build something in a weekend for $200, or you could spend 3 months with me and my team to get what is essentially a small thing. The advice is I literally encourage people to go and use Lovable, go and use Replit, and then come back to us when the time's right now. So it's part of our strategy is to be there, helping them to adopt that tool, just as a consultancy. And then, yeah, I know that a percentage. So it's kind of the funnel changes. Does that make sense? And we're now putting out content directly around Replit and Lovable. And I had somebody the other day, WhatsApp me, is like, can you send me that Replit guide again that you wrote about what it's going to take to go to production? So it's kind of, you've got to position yourself. But if you don't see the trend and you just continue to expect inquiries to drop in for exactly the same type of work that you used to have, it will come overnight and it will rip the heart out of your business because your cash flow will go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was just about to say, you need to write some content about Replit and Livable, and sort of suggest that once they get to the stage that they need to obviously go to market, they need to
Yeah.
speak to companies like Green Gutter Apps, but you've already done it.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're right there. I didn't think about that because you're absolutely right. I was at the Belfry last week,
Very
and
nice.
yeah, very nice. They've done a lot of work there, so hats off to them. Um, and we got talking to this couple on the left hand side of us while we were having a coffee, and I was with a client myself, And I'm not going to talk about what he's doing because I think actually it would have probably got me to sign an NDA. Um, but it was fantastic. We had a conversation. He was not a techie in any shape or form. He'd done something in the education market that's going to absolutely catapult his idea into many schools. The idea was very simple. I have spoken to you about it, Paul, but I can't broadcast it. It would be very unfair to do so. But as you rightly say, people are having these ideas now, and they can use Replit, Livable, Mind Studio to bring these ideas to life. And what you actually said there, which was when they get to the stage where this needs to go to market, then of course they need people like us
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
get to that
because
level.
it's a totally different beast. It's a bit like you're building out your first house or your first room of a house, and then actually to go to scale, you do need Buckingham Palace, and it's how do you go from there to there? And it's kind of like it's a really bad analogy, but yeah, it's more like a cathedral is what people actually need at the end of it. But you never start building the cathedral; you start building a little cupboard next door, and it's like I think that's the thing. And what was going through my head as you were talking is what I'm witnessing is and it's like a profound thing. I think people need to slow down. It sounds a really weird thing to say, but there's a group that I belong to, and they're massive advocates of like 90 minutes a day working on your business. And sometimes those sessions are just deep thinking. And that's what people should be doing is the most successful people I've ever met in my life have at some point slowed down, looked at what's actually happening in an industry, and they've literally spent time thinking about their next move, almost like it's chess. And then they come out of it with a strategy and they go, right, we're going to execute this. And I think one of the things that we've been doing is lots of 90-minute sessions, not sat at a computer on a walk, just thinking about what is happening. And I think the strategy as well is a short-term strategy. Like I don't know how anybody puts together a business plan for the next 3 to 5 years in our industry of software development. I don't know how you can do that. You can put together a 90-day plan. So that's what we do. We iterate in 90 days. I take time out of the business to work 90 minutes a day on it. And some of it is just literally thinking. And so it's not rocket science. It's just some people just are so busy doing the work that they don't look at the strategy. And it goes back to, one of the things that I've worked on is Blue Ocean, and we'll put a show link in there to the book. And again, I'm terrible at remembering
What's,
things like the
what's
author.
Blue Ocean? Sorry.
So it's what we just spoke about. It's this concept of carving out a business model that you can't be compared to anyone else. Like it's built on what the market wants, but what it means is you're not competing in a red ocean, which is just price sensitive. So people come to you and they will pay for a premium product or service because you do something that nobody else in the market does. And it's like they can't compare. You're incomparable. So it's called category of one. It's called like lots of different things. But I think fundamentally, people need to take time out of their businesses to think deeply about where their industry is heading and to really develop their own blue ocean so that they then can carve out, right, this is the next 90-day plan. And that's the real strategic thing that businesses need to do because it's just changing.
It is.
So
It is.
slow down is my advice.
Yeah, and I agree with you because often I get my ideas, my um, strategies for when I'm go out running. Just having that time
Yep.
just to step away from the computer screen, which we should do anyway. But as you say, have those ideas. I love those times where I just go out for a run for a couple of miles and sort of absorb what's going on and thoughts and feelings that way. So we talked about the 40 jobs, and we will actually put those in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about your children. My kids are my eldest is 20 next month. Now I set him off down the task of being an electrician,
Okay.
and I can safely say that uh, that's probably one of the lowest professions that AI will overlap. um, I don't know whether I did that intentionally. I think probably years ago I probably did think, well, it's probably the better approach to go for a trade. My daughter, she's learning skills in hairdressing. And my youngest lad is 14, so he's still too young at the moment. But what about yourself? What are you doing with your children?
Yeah, so, we actually went to our first university open day in
Yeah.
Cardiff, yeah, last weekend. That was really it's a brilliant city. I was like to Nikki, "Would you move to Cardiff?" Yeah, I loved it, I did. My wife is a teacher, and she's looking at primary teaching, so again, it's gonna be impacted by AI, but I think the things that are manual trades and teaching and things like that, they will have an impact, but it's kind of less than software. Software development is just we are a digital service, so the level of impact. My son, I mean, he is, he's an amazing little, kid. He's doing his GCSEs at the moment. He's doing his mocks and stuff, but he's just, I'd say, he's your average boy. He's Xbox all the way. That's his social network. Revision is like an arm wrestle. He it's not even interested in post 16 options. It's kind of like I look at it in the summer and it's like, no, you need to be going and choosing now. The thing he's muted is he's nothing like me. He's really good at sport. So it's sport and music is his thing. So he's talking about physiotherapy. And again, yes, machines and X, Y, and Z and robotics and stuff could potentially help, and they will help in that industry. But I was like, again, it's kind of it ticks the box of a manual hand-on human kind of experience, doesn't it? It's not to
It's
say
that
it won't
relationship
touch.
and
Yeah, it's
yeah.
exactly. So he's really interested in physiotherapy, and doing A levels in biology is part of that, I believe. But there's options to go to colleges, universities, and do different sports kind of physiotherapy degrees. And it's about the human body at the end of the day, isn't it? That's what physiotherapy is. We're lucky that a friend, we're going to their birthday party at the weekend. That she's a physiotherapist in the NHS, so he's got a resource he can have a conversation with and stuff. But I think first off, he needs to get off the Xbox and really think. But yeah, I think it's interesting that the trajectory of my kids and your kids is it's like, well, where will it be? It will be impacted by AI, but where it's not on those lists, if that makes sense. None of that is on those lists, is it?
But
Um,
it's all those jobs that require physical work,
yeah,
almost like the jobs that as human beings we started with.
yeah,
Like you say, the carpentry, painting,
yeah,
decorating, roofing, building houses.
yeah.
Obviously, AI can't touch that at this stage.
Wow. I mean, there are. Yeah, I mean, this is again is like it's not nothing is untouchable, and
Although
it's.
although although I've got a friend that's basically trying to use drones to paint houses.
Oh wow.
So he's got, I don't know how he's done it, and he's not painted it yet.
Yeah.
But he is trying to use drones to paint walls, etc. So you could say that's got an element of AI to it, hasn't it? When
Yeah.
it sort of calculates.
Well, at the end of the day, yeah, and I have seen you can go and find it. I've definitely seen, kind of like so experiments and investments going into things where house building, anything manual is getting, robotics and AI. It seems just so much further. It feels like my wife was taking a mickey out of me the other day saying like, "Oh, I bet you love Tomorrow's World." And I was like, "Well, Tomorrow's World was like, predicting 30, 50 years in the future." I'm like, it needs to, if they did one today, it needs to be about what's going to happen in the next 6 months. It's that kind of thing. But it's not, again, I don't think it's unbelievable to think that the most manual industries right now won't have a level of robotics around it and AI. And there's talk already. I think we might have talked about it in the past, but there's talk about new builds that the vision for the future there is you'll have like these little bots in a cupboard and it knows the complete schematics and wiring and X, Y, and Z of the house, and it comes out as like a little service bot and fixes things. And it's like it sounds ridiculous, but it's believable, if that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it know schematics and stuff? People have now got Hoovers in their house that's a little robot vacuum flying around. Okay, wiring a house is a very different thing, but that was a Tomorrow's World item, wasn't it? That you would have this little vacuum that comes out and goes around on a daily basis and goes back into its thing and self charges. So why wouldn't you have something? And I think people need to open their minds to two factors: the speed of change and just whatever you thought was impossible is most things are now possible. That's the and when they bring super intelligence out, which they reckon will be 3 years, that changes everything. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, a bit of a careers talk there, but I think, I mean, we should all say that as a complete disclaimer, these are literally my opinions. I have no basis of qualification or like, um, it's just an opinion, but it's what I see in tech. And I think in tech, we've always been at the forefront of any digital change.
Well, I think we're reading that article. That they're saying that AI efficiencies are, that the chatbots are replacing employees. I think it's
Yeah.
700 employees in Microsoft. They're laying off 15,000 jobs, 69 billion pounds of AI investment. So you say that they're just your opinions, but these big tech firms, they're doing it.
I mean, if you look at, we talked about offshoring, talk about call centers. Talk about call centers for 1 second. My wife hates talking to me about AI. If somebody says, "Paul, what do you think of AI?" She's like, "Oh my God," and walks away. But we were talking about call centers the other day at a family a meal, and I was just saying that, like, you've just got to go back to the job to be done. Like, why is somebody calling the call center? They're calling to get an answer to a query. That's all they're not calling for any other reason than just to get an answer to a query or a problem solved. So, you know, 20 years ago, you'd speak to a UK call center. Now there still are UK call centers and they're still popular, but a load of it got offshored, exactly like you said that happened with software development, wasn't it? Because it's cheaper. Then came the frustrations with that. At the moment, voice AI is perfectly capable of having a conversation and responding based on its knowledge bank, right? So, and everyone just puts their view of AI on what happens now. And it goes back to this age-old conversation of, well, I know it's AI. Dispel that myth. You call up a call center and you have a conversation and it sounds human and it gets you the answer and it gets a service engineer booked in and you won't even know that it's not human. Or think of it from the other thing of just pure like convenience. Imagine a call center where your job to be done is to book a service engineer and for the answer and for the not to be put on hold and for you to be answered within 2 rings and then the service engineer arrives, within whatever time scale. That is the capability of an AI call center because there's no limit to how many agents you could have answering phones. It has access to booking systems, it has access to diaries, it has access to what's available. And then what will happen is call centers will still exist with humans, but you'll be talking like 10% of the employee quota needed because they'll manage the exceptions. So they will divert queries that it can't answer to the humans. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a really good analogy of the simple things and the doing are being eradicated at a huge pace. And then it's kind of, well, why would you keep a human being on? Because they're the best of the ones that you employ that can answer the most complex queries. But they'll probably still be using AI to get an answer. They'll probably still be at a terminal getting an answer in that way. So I think the call center is on the list, or call answering services, I think it says. But yeah, if I call, a head office, I've got in my head a job to be done. That's the way people should be thinking about it. I'm not calling to speak to a human. I have to speak to a human because that's the only vehicle available at this moment in time.
Well, thanks, Paul. So that's a wrap on Control Alt Dev and the top 40 jobs being replaced or maybe more accurately being reshaped by AI. So the takeaway, AI isn't here to take your seat. It's here to change the tools on your desk. Jobs most at risk are the ones that stay static, doing the same thing the same way. But the people who learn to work with AI, not against it, will be the ones rewriting the job descriptions of the future. Whether you're a developer like Paul and I, a designer, a writer or manager, this is your Control Alt Dev moment. Hit reset, adapt and evolve. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode useful, give it a share, drop us a follow, and let's keep this conversation going because the next wave of change is already upon us.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.